I never thought betrayal would come wearing my mother's voice or my father's certainty. I believed trust was something permanent in a family, unspoken, unbreakable, inherited like blood. I was wrong. I was the daughter who followed rules. The one who learned early that praise came from responsibility, not dreams. While other girls my age spent weekends laughing in cafes or planning trips, I worked extra hours, saved every spare rupee, and told myself I was being smart. My parents used to nod approvingly when I talked about my bank account, how carefully I managed it. My father even helped me open it years ago, proud of how mature I was. That account became more than savings. It was my safety net, my proof that if life collapsed, I wouldn't. Every deposit felt like a small promise to my future self. My younger sister, Nita, lived in a different world. She jumped from one plan to another, quitting jobs when they bored her, chasing ideas that never lasted long enough to grow roots. My parents called her sensitive, creative. She just needs support. My mother always said, when Nita struggled, they wrapped her in comfort. When I struggled, they handed me silence and expectations. Still, I never complained. I believed balance would come eventually. One quiet evening, over tea that had already gone cold, my mother spoke as if she were discussing the weather. "We've given Nita access to your bank account," she said lightly. I laughed. I actually laughed because surely she didn't mean what she had just said. My father didn't look up from his phone. "She needs it right now," he added, "and you don't. It's just money sitting there." The room felt suddenly smaller, as if the walls had leaned in to listen. I waited for someone to ask my opinion. No one did. "That account," I said slowly, "is mine." My mother sighed, annoyed. "Why are you making this a big deal? Your family." In that moment, something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not dramatically, but enough to change the way I saw everything. They hadn't trusted me with my own future. They had assumed ownership over it. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, listening to the familiar sounds of the house that no longer felt safe. I realized then that my savings weren't seen as my hard work. They were seen as a resource. And resources, in my family, were meant to be shared whether you agreed or not. I didn't confront them again that night. I knew words would only turn into accusations, and accusations would turn into guilt. Guilt they had trained me to carry since childhood. Instead, I lay awake until dawn, staring at shadows on the wall, feeling something unfamiliar settle into my chest. It wasn't anger, it was clarity. By morning, my decision felt steady. I left the house early, telling my mother I had work. The sky was pale, the streets unusually calm, as if the world had slowed down just for me. My hands didn't shake as I walked into the bank. I expected fear to catch up with me, but it never did. The clerk asked routine questions, her voice polite and distant. She didn't know this account held years of discipline, missed pleasures, and silent endurance. She didn't know it had become a symbol of everything my family believed they were entitled to. I watched the numbers on the screen one last time, not with regret, but with resolve. "I'd like to transfer the full balance," I said. The moment the transaction completed, a strange warmth spread through me. It felt like reclaiming something that had been slipping from my hands for years. I opened a new account, immediately new passwords, new rules, my name standing alone where it belonged. When I stepped back outside, the sunlight hit my face, and for the first time in a long while, I felt taller. Lighter, as if I had taken a deep breath after holding it for too long. That evening, my sister called. Her voice was sweet, almost playful. "Mom said you're okay with me using the account," she said. I knew you'd understand. I closed my eyes and listened. There was no gratitude in her tone, only assumption. Still, I kept my voice calm, of course. I replied, "We'll talk later." She didn't hear the pause between my words. She didn't hear the door quietly closing. The next day, the house exploded. My mother's voice echoed down the hallway, sharp with panic. My father's footsteps were heavy, urgent. They stood in front of me, faces tight with disbelief. "The money is gone." My mother said, "What did you do?" I met their eyes without flinching. I moved it. I answered, "Yesterday." The silence that followed was thick, stunned, almost unreal. They had expected obedience. Compliance. What they hadn't expected was action, and in that silence I realized something powerful. For the first time, they were afraid of losing control, while I had finally stopped being afraid of them. The silence didn't last long. It never does in families like mine. My mother was the first to speak, her voice trembling, not with understanding, but with outrage. "How could you do this to us?" she asked, as if I had stolen something sacred instead of protecting what was mine. My father's disappointment cut sharper than anger. "We raised you better than this," he said. "You're acting selfish." That word settled heavily in the room. Selfish. The same word they had always saved for me whenever I chose myself, even briefly. I felt the old reflex rise in my chest, the need to apologize, to explain, to fix their discomfort. But I didn't move. I didn't take anything from anyone. I said quietly, "I moved my own money." My sister stood behind them, arms crossed, eyes glossy with tears that didn't quite fall. "You know I need it," she whispered. "Why would you do this now? Need it for what?" I asked. The question hung in the air longer than it should have. She shifted, glanced at our parents, then back at me. Her answers came in fragments: plans that weren't plans, expenses that weren't urgent, dreams that had no shape. The more she spoke, the clearer it became what none of us wanted to admit. This wasn't about survival. It was about convenience. My parents exchanged a look, brief, uncomfortable. I realized then that they had never truly asked her either. They had assumed I would continue to be the safety net, the quiet solution to problems they didn't want to face. "You have more than enough," my mother insisted. "Why are you being so difficult?" Because for once I was tired of being easy. I worked for that money. I said, my voice didn't shake, every late night, every sacrifice, and no one asked me if I was willing to give it away. My father exhaled slowly, frustration etched into his face. "Family helps family." "Yes," I replied, "but family also asks. Family doesn't decide for you." That was the moment the argument shifted, not because they agreed, but because they understood I wasn't backing down. The guilt no longer worked, the labels no longer stuck. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult anyone. I simply stopped defending myself, and in that calm refusal, something changed. They were forced to see what they had ignored for years. They had raised one daughter to depend and another to endure, and they had expected endurance to last forever. But endurance, once exhausted, turns into boundaries, and boundaries, I had learned, are terrifying to people who benefit from your silence. The house didn't return to normal after that. Conversations became careful, like everyone was walking on cracked glass. My parents avoided the subject, as if silence could undo what had been revealed. My sister stopped asking altogether. The entitlement that once filled the room had dissolved into something unfamiliar: uncertainty. Days turned into weeks, and in that space, I began to see my life more clearly. I noticed how often I had shrunk myself to keep peace, how many dreams I had delayed because responsibility always came first. The money had never been the real issue, control was, and for the first time it no longer belonged to them. I started planning quietly, no announcements, no arguments, just preparation. I found a small apartment not far from work. Nothing luxurious, but it felt like possibility. I packed my things slowly, choosing only what mattered, leaving behind the weight of expectations I had carried for years. When I told my parents I was moving out, my mother's eyes widened in surprise. My father asked if this was really necessary. I nodded. I need space, I said, and for once I didn't soften the truth to make it easier for them. Moving day was quiet, no dramatic goodbyes, just boxes, a deep breath, and a door closing behind me. Not in anger, but in certainty. Life on my own felt strange at first. The silence was different here, peaceful instead of heavy. I decorated slowly, cooked meals without being questioned, slept without guilt pressing against my chest. The money I had saved remained untouched, but it felt different now. It wasn't just security, it was independence. Eventually, my parents called. Their voices were gentler, cautious. They didn't apologize fully, but there was understanding between the lines. My sister found work, not because she wanted to, but because she had to, and for the first time, that felt like growth instead of punishment. I forgave them not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. Forgiveness didn't mean access. It didn't mean returning to the old patterns. It meant letting go without giving myself away. The revenge they never saw coming wasn't cruelty or loss. It was my absence from the role they had assigned me. I didn't take anything from them. I simply stopped being available to be used, and in choosing myself quietly, firmly, I finally became rich in the only way that truly mattered, free.